To get started, I need 6 people. I need 6 people. All you have to do is stand. And if you don't do it, raise your hand. I'm going to come grab you. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. All you have to do is stand. All right, we're going to talk about projects. Come on over here. Stand over here. Sorry about that. My instructions weren't the best. Here's a board. Open it up. We're going to talk about projects, and we're talking about estimating. But let's get some baseline terminology and sequencing down. Okay, who didn't come up here I pointed to? Oh, I did. All right. Jim, come on up. I need you, the 6 of y'all, to arrange yourself from the start of the project to the end of the project. A project, generic project. And that's operations and maintenance. So where would you go? And y'all can yell out directions as this happens. So, yeah, come on, yell at them. There you go, there you go. All right. So, for the most part, we agree, right? Long-range planning, it may have advanced planning depending on your district or terminology. Then we have cheap adhesive that says planning and programming. Preliminary engineering, design, that's when we really get into PS&E. Goes to construction, then operations and maintenance. Need another volunteer. Real quick. Looks like he's had coffee, so he's ready to go. Where does letting go in this process? All right. So we're all on board so far. Need another volunteer. Swallow and then step on up. Oh, it's a light piece of board, so it shouldn't hurt. We have the engineer's estimate. We all know we have to develop an engineer's estimate, but where does it go? Do y'all agree with this? Should he go left or right? He needs to go to the right or to the left? All the way to the left. Now remember, what is the engineer's estimate? That's the last estimate that the engineers say that project's going to cost. Yeah. Theoretically, I mean, there's cases where some things happen within the system. So we can all agree with that. And what is that engineer's estimate? What does that represent? Best guess of construction cost? Total cost of the project. Keep going. I heard somebody say something else. Guess what the bid is going to be. What should you be estimating? When you're developing the construction cost, what should you be estimating? Budget, but at what point? Of the future. Future when it goes to letting. What if I say what you should be doing is figuring out this cost at the end of construction? Isn't that really what you're wanting to do? Does this number match either one of those numbers? Okay. And some of that is taken care of DCIS and the escalation that's built into it because, projects do take a little while and costs increase. Some of it's built in there. But isn't this the cost at the end of construction that you're really wanting to say that's how much that project cost? See? You're not really trying to say, I want that number to match this number. You're not trying to guess, and I know some metrics are out there that how well did you get to letting? How well did you match what the contractor is going to give you as a number? But the engineer's estimate should really be, at the end of the project, what did it cost to build that project at construction? Now, I realize some of you are thinking, what about right-of-way? What about utilities, things of that nature? So let's talk about that a little bit. When you're way down here in long-range planning, you have to give a number, right? It may be 20 years out, it may be 10 years out. It may be a project, all you know is turn this state highway from a 2-lane roadway to a 4-lane roadway with shoulders. So you're being told, give us a number. And sometimes you only have about 2 hours to come up with that number, because that's the reality, right? You get out of a city council meeting, what would it cost to do this? And your boss texts you on the way back to the office, and you have 30 minutes to come up with a number. But what's going on? What do you know? What do you not know? Well, pavement design, you have no idea. Drainage considerations, really don't know. And this is not wanting to work with me. There we go. You don't know. There's a lot of unknowns, but you make the best guess you can based on the length of the project, the number of structures in the project, and based on your knowledge of the area. But you're given a number, right? Once you get into planning and programming, give me a number. What is it going to cost to build that project? Well, we need to budget it. And maybe this is in the you're getting into your 4-year plan. Maybe you're not. But you're still being told, give me a number. What is it going to cost to build that project? Well, over time, you may be given additional information. You now know, okay, we're going to upgrade the shoulders. Okay, I now know what the shoulder width is going to be. I don't have to guess at that anymore. You may be told a little bit about the pavement. You may know it's a flexible pavement, but you don't really know the design, the depth, how much base repairs you're going to have to do if it's a reconstruction. So you still have all these issues. And what does a good engineer do when we don't know the answer? Swag. We start fluffing things up just in case. But that's okay. It really is, because you don't know. You don't have the time, you don't have the resources to get the answers. And so you kind of have some things you do know. I know the length of the project, I know the lane widths, a number of lanes, I know what it costs to do X, Y, Z, do the quick multiplication in a spreadsheet, got that, but you're still making a lot of guesses. And so you're putting in some fluff in the project cost to cover that, right? All right, this project is moving forward. It is now probably definitely in your 4-year plan. What's it going to cost? Update DCIS. I need to know what we're going to do. At this point, what do you know and what do you not know? Yell out some things. What do you still not know early on? And I'm talking probably you're not even at 30%. You're still that early project. What are some things you typically don't know for sure? Yep. Traffic control. Hydraulics. You probably don't have a drainage design. You kind of know a little bit. You may have to extend some existing, but there may be some new things that you have to develop. But give me a number. Give me a number. You know, right-of-way and utilities, that can still be unknown. Exactly. So there's still a lot of unknowns. And so what do? We carry what we can calculate, but we still put some fluff in there because we don't know. Again, that's okay. I'm going to call that fluff contingency. We know we're probably going to have to spend some money on X, Y, Z, but we don't really know how to put a direct cost to it yet. So we put in a drainage. This is going to be $2 million for drainage on a $80 million project. That's fine. Now we get into design. What happens with design? What are we doing in design? PS&E. aren't you trying to eliminate as many unknowns? By that time, you know the soil conditions. You know you're going to have to do some excavation. You know what the pavement design is. You know the hydraulic situation. You can pretty much guess what you're going to have to do with traffic control. When you do switchovers and detours, all that's pretty much coming up. But we're still just putting a number on the project, a cost, construction cost. And I want to leave right away in utility adjustments out of this just for a little bit to keep it simple. So this is the construction cost. We've got to get a number. And every time you get updated plans from your consultant or you get to another milestone in-house, you're updating that number. And you may or may not be updating DCIS based on the criteria and requirements of your district, okay? When you get here, you're being told, give me a number, correct? I want to know what's going to happen when we take this project forward. My question to you is, do you still have these? Do you still have some unknowns? You really do. I know I have to do some excavation, and that excavation is going to run in some rock, but I really don't know if it's going to be 20% rock or 40% rock. But you've allowed us some allowances, you have some numbers, and you are now, your base estimate, what you know, is the bulk of your estimate, but you still have a little bit in there, possibly very deliberately labeled in your estimate, or buried in your estimate within your quantities and unit prices. But you run the numbers, you got a number at the bottom, hey, this is going to be a $40 million project, it goes to letting. This is where it's going to get controversial. Do you want that number to exactly match that number, ideally? Ideally, okay. So you have a contractor, goes to bid, it's awarded. Does the contractor have any question marks? Yeah, and sometimes they're known, sometimes they're not. Sometimes they're, for any contractor in the room, I apologize, but sometimes you can forecast your change orders, right? You know something was missing in the plans or some detail that you know that's going to happen and it's going to cause a change order. So even though you're at this stage, there are still some questions going on. Goes to construction. Let's say it goes pretty much to plan. At this point, you have your base estimate, pretty much all your unknowns. You still have a little contingency in there because there's that example of excavation. Maybe there's more rock there than we realize. That's going to have a cost. Okay, we all accept that and move on. What's happening to the number here during construction? It typically does go up, and DCIS accounts for that, right? There's I think it's 4% that's added in there because of potential change orders and things of that nature. But what's happening to your estimate? Your estimate doesn't stop here. You don't just say, okay, we got to letting, got the contract, now it goes over to the construction division and field inspection. You should still be managing your estimate at this point. Why? Because you have that little bit of contingency, and as the project advances, you're getting more and more knowns, and hopefully that contingency is shrinking. Everything's getting defined. Now you're going to say, well, what's that? That contingency is real money. There's arguments of who owns contingency and where it goes and things like that. But that contingency is not a pot of money that you get to spend when you have a chance to spend it. That contingency is based on what you don't know. And you've put it in here purposely to address those unknowns. So that when it gets to this point, it's not a surprise. You don't go, oh my gosh, I got to do a $800,000 change order because we ran into so much more rock than I ever imagined. Well, you have a little bit of that here. Now, where's that contingency reside? Is it in DCIS? Is it in my engineer's estimate that I upload in DCIS? That's still to be determined. That's going to be a little bit of what does finance need to do? What does the LBB require? Also, how does the district want to deal with contingency? Sometimes contingency resides in the project. Other times contingency resides at the district level. That in case something happens, change orders and more known facts come about, you can tap into that and it's not a tragedy to your district's budget, okay? So ultimately, we finish construction and we get the final cost of the project. And that final cost, we would really like to have match up here. Except what? Hopefully, that number is a little higher than what you end up with. Why? Contingency. Hopefully, throughout the process of the construction, you are able to address those unknowns, take into account those risks, and your contingency can drop. So here, you have some contingency in the project. When you're here, there's no contingency in the project. That makes sense? Okay, I'm going to throw another term out. Baseline estimate. Where in this process, well, let's talk about baseline first. This baseline is a number where you're committing some definition. You're committing that we've defined the project, the scope's been defined, and we're going to come up with an estimate, and that's how we're going to manage the design. So where do you want this baseline to go? It's not just a budgeting number. You are committing we can do this project pretty close to this number. And that number does have some contingency in it. It may have a lot of contingency in it because you have a lot of unknowns. But where does that baseline estimate fall in this process? Yell out when I get there. I see shaking heads. Right there? Okay. And so let's kind of talk about what's happening right here. Again, this may be a little bit different and the semantics may be slightly off, but you're pretty much, when you go from preliminary engineering into design, you've kind of transitioned into probably at least 30 to 40% of the design completeness. Some of the major decisions have been defined. Your pavement design has been defined. The number of structures you're going to have and the type of structures have probably been defined. You don't know all the details. You don't know if your drill shafts are going to be 46 inches or 48 inches. You don't know that, but you know you're going to have drill shafts, and you can probably count how many and kind of guess at the depth. But this baseline is what you start managing to. When you set the baseline estimate, two things happen. One, the scope of the project is defined. You're not going to go back and say, oh, well, it's getting too expensive, so we're going to take those 10-foot shoulders and make them 8-foot shoulders. No, you don't redefine the project just to hit the number. If you need to redefine your baseline, that's okay. Have the conversation saying, hey, this is becoming a more expensive project than we thought because of X, Y, Z. Or because there's still unknowns and I can't answer those unknowns. But this is a number, let's just say $40 million. We're pretty much committing the scope of the project and what we're going to do to design this project to $40 million to deliver that scope. This number is not set in stone. It can change, but you don't want it to be just fluctuating. This is a number where they're starting to plug in the 4-year plan. Okay, we've got to commit $40 million to this project. You needed to start making sure that our design is going to be done at $40 million. And if it's not, don't change the design just to make $40 million. Let us know what's going on and let us have the conversation to decide, do we need to add some more money to this project because it's going to give the project we want and everybody's expecting? Do we need to change this baseline or not? So I would agree with you. At this point, this is where the baseline goes. Question. What estimate number should be very close to your baseline. Which of these estimates, and remember there's construction cost over here. Thank you. And which of those estimates are you wanting the baseline to match up with? I'm sorry? I heard letting. Construction. That's the number your baseline is trying to target. It's not going to be identical. You're not trying to match it to the penny like a good engineer wants to do. But you're trying to say, we're delivering that project for $40 million, and when it's finished, it was $40 million, or hopefully a little bit less. So that becomes the budgeting exercise, and that's what your DEs are looking at. So when they're asking you to give numbers, your estimate, what's it going to cost? You can give numbers, and you can make a commitment to your district, and your DE buys off of, this is what we're going to be targeting. And at this point, we've also defined what the scope of the project is, so that later on, we don't start cutting the scope just to make that target, which is called designing to a budget. We all do it. All DOTs do it. I mean, Washington could say, yes, we do it too. It's the ugly gorilla in the room. We have to do that sometimes. But ideally, when we get here, it's a $40 million project, we can also specifically say, this is what we're delivering. Okay. Thank y'all. Give them a big hand. Yeah, you could just lay them against the chairs right there. Well, TxDOT realized all this, and sometimes there are semantic differences. What different districts want to do and how they do it, and then you have the divisions come into play and what they are requiring. And sometimes we don't understand why they're making us do what they're making us do, but we do it. But the deal is, we need to start defining these points in our estimate and what that estimate means. And we need to understand how that conversation of, there's always those unknowns. And we acknowledge that, and we're putting money in the estimate, that contingency in the estimate. And way down here, your contingency could be huge. All I know is we're taking this state highway and going from 2 lanes to 4 lanes. That's all I know. But that contingency, as you define things, it's getting smaller and smaller, and it's carried throughout the project basically until construction ends. So TTI, with the help of the project management office, we kind of put all of this into a guide. It's the construction cost estimating guide that was completed last year. And we took it out to some districts and had some workshops and talked through these issues. In this guide, it's still being kind of prepped for presentation to the districts. This guide really talks about, what do you do at each estimate step? What do you do at each phase of the project? What do you need to be documenting? How do you define your contingency? All of that is defined in this guide. So hopefully it's a little bit of a how-to. It's not an instruction book. It's not saying you do this, you do this, you do this. It's like, consider this. What are your unknowns? Document your unknowns. How did you come up with your estimate to say, I need $800,000 for excavation? Based on what assumptions? So that's really what this estimating guide is helping you do. So that as you have a conversation with your area engineer, with your design team at the district, they know at any given time what that estimate means and what's being committed to on the design side, what they can commit to in their budgets, their 4-year plans, and what you communicate to the public, what number. You don't want to tell the public, hey, this is a $12 million project, contractor gets it for $13 million, and then way down here it was a $20 million at conclusion. Go ahead and tell them it's a $20 million project. And the guide, estimating guide, helps give you some guidance of how to do that. If you want more information, Lynn Isaac, Mike Watry in the project management office can give you some guidance and some documents. They're also giving, prepping some of their staff to go out into the districts to kind of demonstrate possibilities of how you go about this, we're not trying to reinvent what TxDOT's doing. We're really trying to document the process and making sure there's defined terminology, and when you say, this is my baseline estimate, what that means and where that is in the process. So everybody understands, this is my baseline. And that what you're actually trying to do is estimate construction cost at the end, not just how close do I get to the letting.